Greetings. It is Thursday, June the 25th, in the eventful and soon to be recorded as infamous year of 2026. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Midweek Report. Well, when we have these reports on Thursdays, usually it's so that we can go into a little bit more detail with a historic perspective on something that's going on right now. And of course, the big thing is the war or police action or military action or whatever you want to call it going on with Iran, Israel, and the United States. Now, something very significant happened over the last few days, and not to be overdramatic, it's a symptom of the United States becoming one thing or the other, and that is the War Powers Resolution. Now, if you're not familiar with it, back in 1973, when the Vietnam War was a real problem, to put it very politely, Congress said that presidents should not have the power to send massive military forces into a theater and send back a lot of coffins unless Congress has something to say about it. Now, our Constitution reserves the right for Congress alone to declare war. And declaration of war used to be a very cut and dried thing. You were either at war with someone shooting at them, or you weren't. But things have gotten very innocuous in the last century or so. Last time we declared war on a country was December 8, 1941, when Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor and the United States went into World War II with both feet and both fists. The problem is that yesterday, barely, the Senate decided not to impose controls on the president for having soldiers or military action going on in the field past 60 days. Actually, you can also extend that for another 30 days, which is what they were dealing with. Now, this is a very strange law. It was passed in 1973. Richard Nixon vetoed it, but Congress overrode the veto, which they have the power to do. And we now have this ability for Congress to pretty much say they don't want to do something, but there's really not much enforcement that they can have. In other words, they say that you can't keep troops there that long, you can't be engaged in military conflict that long unless we say so, and if we say no, you've got to bring everything back home. The problem is there's really no mechanism to do that. It was a stupid law that they passed back in 1973, but then again, the Vietnam War was a very, very, very stupid war. Start stupid wars, get stupid legislation, I guess, is the lesson there. Now, here's the problem with this. When a country gets into military conflict, whether or not you agree with the reasons, whether or not you think they were good or not, isn't as relevant as the fact that once you're into something, you better win it. The same thing goes for a fist fight on the street. Someone comes up to you, doesn't matter how peaceful you are. If you get attacked or if you see the need to defend somebody, you better get into it and not think of the social problems that the person in question you're fighting has. Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is an evil state and has been killing Americans since it began almost 48 years ago. That's just a fact. And a lot of people like to say it was never killing Americans. That's nonsense. I'm sorry. All the evil of the Islamic fundamentalist movement that has cursed the planet since the 1970s comes from there. But that doesn't matter when it comes to military action. When you're in a fight, you got to win it. The reason the Vietnam War went the way it did, and whether or not it was justified, is because the Vietnamese, the communist Vietnamese, and those backing them, China and the Soviet Union, knew that if they could play it right, the political will to continue would end. Generals don't usually decide on ending a war. The accountants do, and the politicians. And that's why the U.S. ended up the way it did in Vietnam. Could it have won? Yeah. It would have ended up resulting in the deaths of many more millions of Vietnamese, which wouldn't have been justified in my view. But when you get into a fight, you better win it. Now, by Congress passing a law that says the president has to end a military conflict, you can see the problem there. It's almost as stupid as when President Obama was announcing when he was going to pull troops out of Afghanistan. All the Taliban had to do was wait. And they did. And the results were catastrophic, not just to the people of Afghanistan, but also the people of the world and also the United States. Here's the question that we have to ask ourselves. It's not this little bit of legislation. The Senate decided not to go along with it after a very heated lunch that President Trump had with some members of the Senate, and that's been written about in a lot of places. But we have to go down to a very important question, and that is, what country is the United States? Is it a republic or is it an empire? I would urge everyone who has the least bit interest in history to watch the very last speech John F. Kennedy gave, and it was on November 22nd, 1963, in Fort Worth, Texas, at a breakfast before he got on a plane for Dallas, and the rest is history, as they say. Tragic history at that. But he said something in that speech which I would like Americans to think about. And back then there was a big movement to make the U.S. more isolationist, as they like to say. Some people like to call that minding their own business. But the thing he said was, history will not allow us to be the people we were. I'm paraphrasing that, by the way. But history has changed the country, it's changed who we are, it's changed our mission. That's what he was pretty much saying. In ancient Rome, and you call the term ancient Rome, there were two Romes. There was the Republic and the Empire. You had a very successful republic that built an empire. Unfortunately, it was run with the political system that was not designed to run an empire. It was designed to run a relatively small republic, basically the size of Italy. And it did that fairly well. But when it started conquering other lands and other territories thousands of miles away, it didn't work anymore. Julius Caesar knew that, and he was trying to come up with some sort of system. I'm not going to delve into the politics of the time because, frankly, I wasn't there, and things have changed over the millennia since then. He was assassinated, of course, but there was a power vacuum, and there was a need for a strong hand in running an empire. Augustus ended up becoming the first Roman emperor, and Rome went from being a democratic republic to being basically a ruthless dictatorship with a few trappings of democracy there for flavor and for appeasing the public. The United States has an empire. We have hundreds of military bases around the world. We have the largest military in human history. We have enormous military power. We have an economy that's very big, too, although the average person no longer partakes in that prosperity. That's a very sad truth. But we're at a crossroads right now at our 250th birthday. Do we go back to being a republic, or do we go forward with being an empire? Because Trump is not a dictator, but you can see the need for dictatorship when it comes to running things on a global scale. There's no room for consensus in running an empire. Empires are never run on consensus. They're run on the ruthless will of a leader. Now, do you want that, America? Because that's what you're getting. And some people might think that's a great idea. In fact, a lot of people think that's a great idea. Like it or not, the United States has become an empire. Do we turn back the clock and become a republic again, minding our own business, cut back our military, and try to play nice with the rest of the world, even though the rest of the world, frankly, is not very nice, nor is it very civilized, and it's far more corrupt than what we're looking at now, and the U.S. is quite corrupt. Again, an inconvenient truth. We have to be honest about that. Honesty is something Americans have a hard time with these days, but you really have to look at what we're dealing with here. The War Powers Act was designed to be a half measure. Well, we don't mind having an empire as long as it doesn't hurt us too much. When you run an empire, you send soldiers to the other side of the planet to die on dusty fields or drown in foreign waters. Empires cost blood. But then they bring in treasure, don't they? We have all sorts of things we bring in from around the world, from food to oil to raw materials to finished goods. How much of the crap you see down at Walmart or Target actually is made in the United States? No, it's made by slave labor in China and Southeast Asia and other places. America, do you want an empire or do you want a republic? A republic's a lot of work. A republic requires people to take an interest in their education and not farm it out to some people that you never meet. It requires an active participation in the process by which you're governed. That's what we were set up for 250 years ago. A population that would take interest in governing themselves. And nobody seems to want to do that anymore. It requires work. Freedom is something that requires a lot of work. Maintaining it requires even more work. Because if you're going to judge your freedom based on material goods, well, you are in the freest country in the world. You got everything you want, so long as you can pay for it, so long as you can get the money for it. There are millions of Americans who are living below the poverty line. And a lot of them are very talented people. A lot of them are very hardworking people. Empires have very high poverty rates because they are there to serve those that are running the show. Right now we have techno-billionaires. Elon Musk is now the world's first trillionaire. Wow. Do the mathematics on how long he'd be able to spend $1 million a day. $1 million a day, just think of it. Think of $100,000 a day. Most people can't do that. But I digress. The United States is at a crossroads right now, and this just demonstrated it yesterday. The U.S. can either be a republic or an empire. It can't be half of one and half of the other. It's not going to last. Just like our first Civil War, the country could not be half slave and half free. And the U.S. fought it out to decide what it's going to be. So I predict that if there is a second Civil War, and I pray to every god out there and every demon out there that that won't happen, but if it does, it's not going to be over race, it's not going to be over religion, it's going to be over people who want an empire and people who want a republic. That's how the Romans settled it. And the people who wanted an empire won. The world was quite stable for the next many centuries, but it was also quite tyrannical. Christians were fed to lions for entertainment back then. Criminals were treated even worse. Do you want an empire? Or do you want a republic? You can't postpone the choice any longer. 250 years is the usual period of time that a government lasts. So what's going to happen next? What will be functioning in the North American continent 250 years from now? We'll see. The choice is yours. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, whether they want a republic or an empire. And please consider a paid subscription. It keeps the lights on literally and figuratively. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World, the Deep State, and artificial intelligence must be destroyed. Good day.